Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news, or probably better described as video game news and Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. Today is Wednesday, April 5th, starting a little late today and really don't have a good excuse for it. I can say, as far as the accountability section goes, that at the very least I did do something yesterday YouTube related, in that I played some solo mode and made one episode on that, and it was nearly 2 hours to go through the solo mode. Inherently, there's something about this World Legacy story mode that they are really obsessed with. There are now 4 sections of this. Each of the sections are fairly long in just a lot of scenarios, in this last one in particular. So it was like 20 minutes before I could even get past this scenario to unlock this gate to do this duel. And then I could do this duel, then this scenario, and maybe this scenario where needed to be done, or maybe just this scenario and this duel needed to be done to unlock this to do 2 more duels. Then it's just more story, more story, more story. The goal also is story, but no other solo mode has focused on this continuing narrative that feels very anime-esque, except for it's missing all of the content in it. So it's really just a jump. It's more than even abridged. It's like if you took the abridged Cliff Notes version of something and then cut out just another 5% of details in it, so you're not even getting quite a full story. That's what this solo mode in particular felt like. But these cards in particular seem to be what Yu-Gi-Oh! Is focusing on. So if you told me that the World Legacy was the anime that was being told in Yu-Gi-Oh! At this point, assuming there is a Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime even airing at this point, I'd kind of believe you. Or it could just be this is the story that's being told with the expansions, which then doesn't really explain all these other solo modes that they continue to add. Ideally, I'm hoping they just are done with the World Legacy story now, and they just went really long on that, possibly as an experiment, possibly something they did years ago as expansions to the cards. That there was like a Yu-Gi-Oh! Year of World Legacy expansions, and now they're back to more single, separate expansions, which would make more sense, honestly. If Yu-Gi-Oh! Is going to maintain what it is, it needs to basically always add new and different types of content. Then after that, I definitely was not in the mood to do another solo story, so I'll probably try and do that later today. But I did go into my deck editor and craft a decent amount of effect monsters that would be normal or rarity. And we can kind of show that off, as if we can get to it. It's definitely crazy that it's like 5 clicks. So I went in here, clicked create new. I sorted down to normal and rare cards, effect monsters, added them all in groups of 30s to this, then clicked batch, generate cards not owned. I did that 5 or 6 times and went from 6,000 normal and rare crafting points down to 1,000. So now we've kind of balanced this out a lot more. That being said, it probably didn't move the dial much as far as where I was. Anyways, I would say I'm probably close to 4/5, if not 5/6 of the way there, as far as owning at least one copy of every card in Yu-Gi-Oh! Of the 7 to 10,000 cards that probably exist here. But getting that last section is not going to be done with crafting points, particularly just normal and rare cards. I don't have enough crafting points to realistically do anything with super rares and ultra rares. And inherently, if I'm crafting everything except for normal monsters, my collection will be as good as gold anyways, because you really don't need the normal cards unless you really do need a normal card for some old school polymerization thing that's probably never going to really happen. And unless I'm mistaken, I just scrolled through all the normal cards, normal monsters, so there's basically less than 30 of them that even exist, and then everything else is an effect monster. Yeah. Obviously, if you were going to reboot Yu-Gi-Oh! And start from scratch with the lessons learned over the decades of Yu-Gi-Oh! Existing, you would have never had any character be a normal card. Or, and this is something you could certainly do now, and Marvel Snap has this as a concept, you have spell cards or field cards that would increase the attack of normal monsters. Probably would not be crazy to say, put a field spell out there and it says if your monster has no effects whatsoever, all normal monsters get plus 600, 700 attack. Easily you could go even higher. Yep. As far as the other accountability section, let's see. I finished the Lego foosball table set for the most part. I haven't put the minifigs in the foosball, but that's it. And I opened the box to Lego Disney Castle small set. There was a Lego Disney Castle that was very expensive and big, and then there was a smaller one. I opted to go with the smaller one, save a few bucks. I have too many Legos and spend way too much money on Legos. And so that was done. Again, I really question if there isn't just a better set of where they could have just given the minifig characters in the uniforms for the soccer team and the different heads and a few base plates that look like a soccer field and some soccer balls, and call it a day, and get rid of the foosball aspect of it completely. Even if you were to buy the set a second time, the pieces they give you aren't particularly that great for the price. So I don't think buying a second set and then taking apart and saving all the pieces to get away from the foosball table aspect would be the best way to get pieces. Like, usually the best way to get pieces is to find them at garage sales and hope they're not filthy or broken pieces or mixed in with non-Lego pieces. But yeah, I definitely think there's a better set. My concern, though, certainly, is that since these are real human skins instead of the yellow, that the yellow minifigs really should have been what they were doing, because these aren't based on real people, and Lego had, up until this point, had a rule where they only used like a tan skin, black skin, light black skin, or white skin minifig hands and heads if they were representing an actual human being. So when you got something like the Ghostbusters set, which would have been one of the earlier ones that introduced that idea, before that all of the minifigs were always yellow, and the yellow was just like, this is the color we could do and it saves us money, plus then it is nondescript Lego minifig that's not even really any specific race. So yeah, that was a long scrolling down. Like when they did the Lego Ghostbusters set, that was directly implying that they were showing the characters from the Lego Ghostbusters movie. I mean, the Ghostbusters movie, not the. There was no Lego Ghostbusters movie, although it might be interesting if there was. That is something I guess they could probably do pretty well. Is just Legofy a bunch of old movies and make them more kid friendly. What would be really crazy is if they took the same voice acting and audio and just changed the video. But in the case of the soccer players, you would have to pick your favorite soccer player and try to make a minifig that looks something like that. They're not naming any specific soccer player for the foosball team, which is fine. But my concern there is maybe they were dumping that idea and concept too. The foosball table set, and this has nothing to do with video games though, so I'm talking too much about it. The foosball table set though came out maybe a year and a half ago. Honestly, it felt more like it was November of 2022 is probably about when it came out. If going forward we stop seeing any minifigs that are in that color palette as far as skin tones, then that might be the case. It may also just be that they had a ton of extras, but it is extremely strange to end up with, oh gosh, it's got to be at least 12 extra heads and nothing to do with them. And it would be fairly creepy to just have heads on spikes or heads on the wall, unless I can figure out some like artistic way to do that and make it look like they're statues or pictures or something. That might be the best way to do it, is build a small box around the heads as if they're framed in a picture frame. Yeah, I'm still dealing with this moderate emergency. Things look like they're getting better, but at any point the rails could fall off and then it could just be a complete and total disaster. And speaking of complete and total disasters, the big news is almost certainly being emotionally drained by this moderate emergency, medium emergency. I fell victim to my shopaholicness somewhat and opted to buy an aftermarket radio for my car, and am now completely pooping myself on the idea of whether or not I'm going to be capable of correctly installing it. I have never dealt with car radios before, and it definitely seems like for the year and age of my car, there's a lot of proprietary OEM garbage connectors that you have to spend ridiculous amounts of prices for wiring harnesses. The wiring harnesses are like $50 when they really should be about $5 at most. And that is just to avoid cutting wires and splicing wires. Otherwise I could just cut wires and splice wires, but that could be a disaster too. So there's just a lot of information I don't know until the stuff arrives, and just a lot of hope that I haven't totally boned this up. I think, and I've spent a ton of time looking at this and researching this, I think I'll be fairly alright to get some basic functionality to replace the car radio, but I may lose things like the buttons on the steering wheel and all of that, because that's all through this CAN bus, which is digital signals that are still connected through ridiculous connectors. The idea that the EU forced Apple to have USB-C connectors everywhere really should be applied to all internal connections that make sense inside of a car too. Of course, the problem with that, though, is even if it was the physical connectors were USB-C, the limitation on USB is about 16 meters. So, or 16 feet, not 16 meters. So yeah, 16 feet is almost long enough to guarantee a full front to back of almost every car, but it might not be quite long enough. But that's probably not that big of a deal too. You could have USB-C to USB-C connect just everything. As far that a CAN bus, car area network, is what I think CAN stands for, could connect to, and do just like a way better job at it too. Maybe there's something about USB-C connectors where they would not snap in, or they might fall out in the rattling of a car, and that's why there's so many connectors. But almost certainly the case is the car manufacturers are forcing different companies to make different connectors to make everything non-standard, just in an effort to make it more expensive and ridiculous. And in the world of the part shortage, they've bit themselves in the butt around that. Like during the pandemic, when there was the whole part shortage, cars would have probably sat pretty well if all the connectors in the back were just USB-C to USB-C connectors for most things. Of course, wiring directly to a speaker is still going to be an analog connection, and so an audio amplifier can't have USB-C to speaker, but it definitely could have USB-C from the radio to an additional amplifier. But what is in my car is two 22-pin proprietary OEM connectors, and then one, I think, 6-pin square proprietary OEM connector, and some of it is analog, some of it's digital. All of it's going to have to just be rewired via a harness adapter. There's just a lot of potential room for mistakes here, and a lot of potential room for just the price going up. I could see a scenario where, in looking at it, I realized the radio I got is just not the right one to really pick, and then I end up trying to send that back and replacing it. I could see myself just failing miserably to wire things correctly and having to pay a ridiculous amount to have someone install it for me. I could see the backup camera that it comes with not being able to be ignored at so much, so that I could just continue to use the backup camera that's already installed, because the backup camera that's already installed is one of those digital CAN bus connectors, I think, where the one that the backup camera it comes with is an analog connector. I could see the new backup camera actually being worse in quality, like significantly worse. I can see the whole thing melting in heat and breaking after a few months. And see, I'm trying to do this cheaply, but relatively speaking, cheap is not that cheap. Like, even at this effort, I'm spending $300-400. And one of the ways to save money is to not have the adapter that's $100 extra to take the CAN bus steering wheel control stuff and connect that, which that would just be another adapter that turns digital signals to analog signals. We have Tristan on the chat saying hello, how you doing? So yeah, overall I am just really terrified and anxious about screwing this up. Worst case scenario, and almost certainly this wouldn't happen, is I would somehow miswire something so badly that I would blow fuses or break the entire car, which that would be insane if that's what happened. Of course, I'd really like to learn something here, too. It is an interesting idea, certainly, to be able to say, hey, I've done this before, and I figured I can do it again, as far as installing an aftermarket car radio. It leaves the door open, certainly, that I could take out the current radio and change it again to an even higher quality one. Certainly, that's a possibility also. As long as I just don't screw things up too much and break the wiring. That's why I don't want to particularly have to cut the wires and hardwire things, is that I'd like to be able to put the original radio back in if it finds out something. There's apparently an anti-theft in the original radio too that you would have to tap into and program if you wanted to swap out the equipment into a different car. And all of this is not even to improve the audio in the car radio. The problem with my current car radio is that the voice and navigation system is incredibly bad. It cannot understand a single word I say. Like, I will ask it to call someone, and then it will say, did you say call 911? Consistently, over and over again, it will suggest call 911. Or I'll ask it to do something, and it will think I was speaking in French and start responding in French. It's just incredibly awful. It doesn't support AirPlay or Apple and Android Auto as a radio. Its GPS is outdated, and you'd pay through the nose to update the GPS data every couple of years when you can just use Google Maps and Android Auto. So that's the real goal there, is to just have something that could do Android Auto and CarPlay. There is a mirroring functionality if you plug it in on some, and the mirroring functionality if you wirelessly on some others. And you have to be kind of aware of that. There are different levels of Bluetooth versions 5.1, 5.0, 5.2. That might change how the audio sounds somewhat. Also, a lot of that may very well not matter if you have an older phone or a phone that's not compatible. But there's just a lot of hope in this aftermarket the radio to be much more modern technology compared to incredibly old proprietary technology. That being said, it may not be that modern. Like, I'm not 100% sure how Android Auto works. I don't know if there really is a Google Play Store where you could install new apps, or if it's just the default apps that are installed in each specific radio. I don't know if the apps are actually even in the radio, or if they aren't just pulling icons and running the apps off of a phone. So potentially the radio itself may be fairly limited if there is no connected phone to it. Which, yeah, that can be that could certainly be one of the problems. I could have just bought the entire wrong one. There are, I think, some aftermarket radios that will tell you some diagnostic things through the OBD2 port. I didn't get one that did that. There are definitely a lot of differences, certainly if your car has multiple AV ins and outs. If you want to maintain having Blu-ray players, CD players, whatever, DVD players in the back seats in the cars and things like that, or multiple monitor outs. But all that stuff really basically never gets used unless you have kids, young kids, and after that it is just this extra that they put in the cars to keep the prices high. Like, inherently, I've always felt like Tristan says he upgraded the car stereo and had to get an amp and a new battery. Well, I just put a new battery in this car, so I'd hate to have to get a new one on top of that. And as far as an amp goes, I hope that I am not touching upon the amp, or the amp is built in. That is part of the wiring, certainly, too, is that because there are all these proprietary connectors, I just am going to have to look at the pinouts and see what wire goes to what, and if one wire does go to an amp, then the audio needs to go out to the amp and then back in. It really should be so much simpler than that, and it should have been simpler 10 years ago, that there should have been some standard, even if the standard was just RJ45 or RJ11 connections, in the sense of how things connected. Yeah, I've consistently felt like cars should have much cheaper base units with less gadgets and features in them. And with the part shortage, we may actually be seeing that at this point, where there really is going to be a thing going forward. Although, so far, that doesn't seem like what they've done. Instead, it seems like they've just made people wait until they can get the components to still sell cars with ridiculous features. One of the things that some cars have, but I don't think mine would support, is a predictive parking lane or reversing lane lines that will curve and estimate where you would go at the current angle of your steering wheel. But yeah, all the equipment is going to start showing up tomorrow, so I'll spend tomorrow hopefully doing it. We have someone named Blade on the chat. Please type in English, otherwise I'll have to block you, because I don't know what you're saying otherwise. in other languages. See, destroying their spell card? No, don't want to do that. So yeah, all of that stuff will start happening tomorrow, and I'll start trying to figure out whether I can really do this or not. Otherwise, this very possibly might be a project that if I'm feeling like I can't really do it now, it might be smarter to just send everything back and give up, or have someone do it for me. I definitely feel like there should be a better standard better standard way to replace radios, and just more people doing it in general. We are much closer as far as cars to the walled garden of Apple having only a couple models of the iPhone than we are the idea of Android, which has at least 4 or 5 major cell phone companies making multiple models. Let's keep on going. Keep on playing. See if we can win here. It really was a decision, mostly in part being around just reducing frustration in particular, in the fact that every single time I was driving the car, I was getting frustrated because I couldn't use the navigation system to get anywhere, and couldn't use it to answer phone calls or make phone calls or anything like that. Blade says, I speak English, I am American. Then he says we don't need radios, we use something else in our cars in Japan. You say as another frequency, which, yeah. Which he also said he had a Tesla, or uses a Tesla. Which, okay, whatever. Like, there's an incredible danger there's an incredible danger about talking about cars and radios, and that I'm going to encourage people to start discussing cars and radios, which is not really something I care about at all. Blade says, come to Japan, our cars are 10, maybe 7 years ahead of other country. We can lower the window with a wave motion instead of touch. Yeah. Okay, Blade. I've had enough of car talk. At this point. Need to hurry up and play. Hmm. Hmm. We really don't have a ton of video game news that I'm particularly caught my interest. Steam Deck was better late than never as far as the top 20 games of March on Steam. Steam Deck in particular, sorted by playtime. This is the kind of list that I potentially should try and make a category or list from. I'm about to run out of time. In the sense that yeah, I'm not going to have enough time to continue playing at this point. This gives me a general idea of just what games people are playing, although Steam Deck is really a secondary list or trending pattern to look for instead of just games on Steam in general each month. But it does give you a general idea of the things that can be played on Steam Deck. Obviously, Hogwarts Legacy, Elden Ring, Stardew Valley, Vampire Survivors are big ones. So yeah, I guess that tells me something. I am noticing that Firefox feels like it's getting even crashier lately in this latest version as far as extensions crashing. Which kind of sucks, but I don't think I would leave Firefox at any point. And I did hear they added like a third-party DLL page to tell you what third-party DLLs might be getting integrated into Firefox, potentially causing it to crash. But that would be different from extensions, which probably aren't using third-party DLLs. But I'd still pretty much have to live with Firefox because I'm not going back to Chrome. Even though I never really did hear like anything big like uBlock Origin stop and not working on Chrome, which they kept threatening that was going to happen. But yeah. It would be a waste of time to go back to Chrome. So let's talk about the video game news here. New Super Mario Brothers movie clip shows Princess Peach's training course. The ruler of the Mushroom Kingdom is attempting to get Mario into shape. This is, I guess, the training course they're talking about. I am seeing conflicting reviews as far as the Super Mario Brothers movies. I'm seeing people sing its praises and saying that this is very much a better than average kids movie. I'm not seeing a lot of people saying it's an amazingly great kids movie. And then I'm seeing reviews claiming that other critics are panning it because it's not enough like the Minions movie or something. It's just like they just don't know what Mario is or means to people, so they just don't have a way of realizing what would be good and what would be bad there. I did hear there's a lot of references and some obvious hope for sequels, That being said, it's all really going to come down to how Nintendo and Shigeru Miyamoto feels about the movie, as far as whether they feel like it was a success or not. Almost certainly there were some movie reviewers who didn't want to watch or review a kid's movie in the first place, and had already pre-written the headlines of the reviews to say it was as bad as the live-action Super Mario Brothers movies, or make those comparisons. So at a certain level, the fact that the live-action movie is even being mentioned probably pisses off Nintendo of Japan and Shigeru Miyamoto enough that they are potentially going to not make another Mario movie anyways. But I could also see that not going that direction, because they may opt instead to just say, well, the Detective Pikachu worked very well, and if Detective Pikachu worked very well, then we need a Mario first-party Nintendo character getting a movie also, since the Pokemon company technically owns Pokemon, and that's a second-party company that is only partially owned. About a third of it's owned by Nintendo. So the Detective Pikachu movie basically made Nintendo only a third of the amount of profit it could have made from its success. But yeah, I'm also seeing a lot of trailers for the Barbie movie now, and it definitely just feels like this year is going to be chock full of a lot of kids movies going into theaters. And yeah, that's a good thing, really. It really potentially could be just a generational thing, that if you have any opportunity whatsoever of taking a kid to a theater to see a movie, you should probably do it regardless of their age. Like, as far as this Mario movie, if you had 2-year-olds, probably a little too young because they couldn't sit through a movie. In fact, it seems to me like a lot of kids can't sit through a movie until they're like 10 or 11. So probably somewhere around 10 years old to 16 to even 18-year-olds, ironically, watching the movie, all should probably go see a Mario movie. And if you're a parent of a 10 to 16-year-old, you should take your kids and go with them. And it sounds like a shill, but I'm just saying, in particular, whether it's the Mario movie or any kids movie that might be the one movie they remember. Because certainly when I was talking about the movies I saw in the theater when I was a kid, I started to think about it, and I'm not sure I watched a single kids movie in the theater ever. There's probably a Care Bear movie that came out when I was very, very young that I missed. And then after that, I don't know of another movie that would have been in theaters. Let's see. Let me see if I can do a quick Google search. Kids theatrical releases in the 80s and 90s. See if we can figure something out here. Okay. I think a big part certainly is the animation wouldn't have been a case. Yeah. So, like the Goonies, for instance, from Steven Spielberg. Was that really supposed to be a kid's movie? Like, would you think of that in the same way as you would think of a Super Mario movie? Karate Kid 1 and 2 Back to the Future, Flight of the Navigator, The Sandlot, Indiana Jones Trilogy, Heavyweights, Monster Squad, Ghostbusters. These are all live action. Home Alone, Princess Bride, E.T., Space Camp, Buttercream Gang. Well, I don't recognize those last two. So it would be maybe if I tried animated instead as a Google search. But that very well, I'm not sure I saw any of those in theater, and even if I did, those live action movies definitely wouldn't have felt quite like they were young kids movies. Anyways, gotta focus here. Activate this, toss this, activate that. Just far too many activations. The Zodiac Tri-Brigade deck still wins quite a well, though. Like, there really is no getting around it. It is doing an amazingly good job of countering pretty much everything and creating a large collection of enemies on attackers on the field on your side to win in 2 turns if you're lucky, while also banishing and destroying things. Of course, even moving fast, you can see how this is like 200 seconds left. You're basically running into the clock with a successful strategy, which I guess is the case. That's probably true with most really successful strategies, is that they are so overly convoluted that they do take forever. See if this list of highest grossing films of the 1980s might be better. Okay, here's a thought that didn't occur to me, and these are probably movies that I did see probably more in school on rainy days than in theaters, but Little Mermaid, Oliver and Company, Land Before Time, Fox and the Hound. Akira is an animated movie, and but not a kids movie. Care Bears movie did come out, and it's in number 8 as far as sales. All Dogs Go to Heaven, Great Mouse Detectives, Black Cauldron, Kiki's Delivery Service, 1989, pretty late on that one. And that would have been more of that wouldn't have come out in theaters. A lot of these highest grossing ones are literally movies that would have grossed a lot in Japan, like Doraemon movies that wouldn't have even come out to the West. Yeah. I do not recall ever actually going to a theater to watch a Disney movie. But that would have been, I guess, the real place. The only thing that would have made any sense at all, honestly. It would have been if I was doing a lot of that, where watching Disney movies in theaters. Otherwise, you're just not going to see that happen. Alright, let's just attack here. Should be able to win. Unless this guy does something crazy. So in a lot of ways, I guess I did just miss out. And so my original thought still stands that this year in particular seems like a really great time to take your kid to the theaters as much as possible, even though it is really expensive, certainly. But it is potentially going to be their once in their childhood experience that they remember. Or if you take them to 10 or 20 movies over their entire childhood, they may only remember one or two of them. Of course, there is also very much an argument to have a home theater and just have a movie night once a month, once a week even, and just watch movies from there. And then that too could be a memorable experience. We're moving our way up the rank of silver, which is good, because if we can get that done in about a week, the first 7 days of April, that'd be great. The other thing I did and wasted a bunch of time with is my Wi-Fi network, again, messed up, and it's just like, it's getting triggered by my AT&T ISP messing things up. But there is also a lot of blame to be put directly on me and my setup and my settings causing troubles. But yeah, so I spent like a whole day messing with the Wi-Fi. And hopefully that won't happen again, but who knows. It could happen, and I may end up messing with the Wi-Fi again later today even. They should give it a week at least. In between each time things mess up, to just make sure if I've got it in a stable condition, it's actually in a stable condition for a while. This should probably be our last game for today, even though if we did win here, it's not going to have us upgraded to level 1. We've made good progress. We've probably done all of the daily quests that we can do. Even if I have a few daily quests left over, it doesn't really matter because I have these solo missions to also focus on. Now, it would be nice to get even 3 solo missions recorded before moving on to the next pre-recorded game I'm going to cover, which I think will be Lego DC Supervillains. It's been a long time since I've done a Lego game, and my pre-recorded footage is now approaching October of this year, so I could certainly make room for a kids movie, a kids game. I think the whole idea of Halloween month and October month and playing really scary games, I think I'm going to throw that out the window. There's just no consistency anywhere else in my channel, so why bother trying to have consistency around the idea of October always being the month for spooky games. Most content creators don't do a ton of that. They may do like an April Fool's Day video, or they may try to do Game Grumps does Ghoul Grumps, but I'm not sure that they've done that recently. So, but yeah, Game Grumps also has a lot more fans and a lot more funding than I do to make content like that. Whereas for me, it makes a lot more sense to potentially play a kid's game, schedule it in the time slot, then reevaluate and say, hey, is there room for a second pre-recorded game to happen here? And if there is, have 2 pre-recorded videos air every day instead of just 1, which would be going back to the old way things were released and would potentially increase my watch time. Getting a lot of views, certainly. I am getting a lot of views with YouTube Shorts, and I need to change the YouTube Short description to potentially have a link that would like link back to something else, so that people that watch the YouTube Shorts watch videos, because the in-screen connectors are not going to work on YouTube Shorts. Although I doubt too many people are going to look in the description of a YouTube Short either and click the link in the description. Apparently YouTube also updated its rules around links in the description. For the most part, I think links in the description are solely being removed on YouTube videos by YouTube when they go to like virus sites or porn sites, or like the full movie is here and click the link in the description scams. Otherwise, I don't think they particularly care what links you put in the description. Particularly if you're linking back to another YouTube video, they won't have a problem with that. It still is very much a question as to where the new guy in charge of YouTube is going to go and how he's going to run YouTube. He probably is just going to somewhat wisely try to not rock the boat too much and just see at most what he could do. His first action of introducing and focusing on podcast is an interesting idea, but it doesn't change that much. At least it hasn't so far. But looking at that, it does seem like podcasts are going to be the focus of 2023 as far as YouTube is concerned. Which may mean he may push more for music as a concept too. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says the next wave of Xbox Game Pass titles have been announced, which Life is Strange True Colors, Moonglow Bay, Panzer Corps 2, Rainbow Six Extraction, The Dungeon of Nalebek, The Long Dark, and Riftbreaker are all leaving on April 15th, whereas the ones being added are Iron Brigade on April 6th and Ghostwire Tokyo on April 12th. So more leaving than coming. Oh, I just thought of something I also wanted to mention, and now it's left my mind. Apparently, Minecraft Legends is coming to Game Pass Library on April 18th. Oh yeah. There was this game being promoted as the first game ever made by an all or mostly Indian company in India, um, called Raji. And when it was first announced, it was looking like it was going to be a console game, and at some point it became a Netflix exclusive. And Netflix's YouTube page put out a trailer for that. So while Raji looks fine for a mobile game, it definitely kind of feels like it took a step down from what it was originally announcing itself to be, or selling itself as more of a console game. And it is now in this smaller marketplace in which fewer people will ever see it on the Netflix mobile app, where you can install and play Netflix games. There we go. Now, honestly, I don't know if Raji really was the first Indian game, or if the company making it is really the first Indian video game company. We have someone called Darkwing Duck saying hi on the chat. One of the things that was a big selling point around Raji as a game that caught my eye was the idea that it was going to tell a narrative around Indian mythos and Indian monsters and demons. So potentially there could have been some room for education there, although there is an incredibly high danger of educating yourself on a different culture based off what a video game is telling you, because a video game could be stretching the truth in favor of making a better game. So we had completed all of the daily quests and even a lifetime quest for banishing cards, which just leaves the solo motion. And then nothing else at the moment. Darkwing Duck saying, do I watch followers replays? No, I don't. I know there's a vague way in which it can be done, but it's an incredible waste of time, because I would not learn anything from it, nor would I have anything to say about it. I'm not that good at Yu-Gi-Oh! Nor is it Yu-Gi-Oh! Even my main focus. So much so that now that I've been playing for an hour, I'm going to stop playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And just focus solely on the news. So make sure the blur is enabled and move on. A new Xbox Remix controller is made up from old parts, CDs, and water jugs. This special edition pad has been created to celebrate Earth Day, which isn't that just a wonderful way to say, hey, we have too many of this color plastic molding, so let's mix and match it all together. Getting a consistent color from recycled parts is kind of the thing that I think is most difficult. So the fact that this looks like a consistent color is great. Although at a certain point I'm not sure if you're always going to get the same colors. That being said, this is very possibly just greenwashing, and they are asking a high price at $85 for a controller that doesn't even seem to me like it is the better Elite Wireless Controller Series type. Yeah. I don't think it's got the flappy paddles on the back from the looks of it, or adjustable thumbsticks or an 8-way D-pad instead of this. So yeah, I really don't see a reason why you would recycle something and then sell it for a higher price versus selling it for the same price. Again, inherently, this is them asking you to subsidize the fact that they made a product that was built out of plastic in the first place and hazardous to society. Inherently, we need a new material to make a lot of things out of instead of plastic, and those new materials, if they are not biodegradable, need to come with some sort of balancing tax or fee to recycle, to reduce or reuse them if they aren't recyclable for everything. And yeah, we almost certainly would never get that in the United States. And meanwhile, even if we did get restrictions on petroleum-based products made out of plastic in the United States, China would never restrict that, so things would still be made out of plastic. The vacuum form molding in particular as a process only works with a small amount of materials that I know of. And 3D printing is not at a high enough quality that you would replace it, and even if you were doing 3D printing at that point, you're still using plastic that is not biodegradable in almost every situation when you 3D print. We need something that would be built out of some kind of bamboo or, like, I don't know, mold or some kind of something that you could almost grow into a specific form and shape. I've seen some packing foam concepts made out of a fungus that they were working on to make a biodegradable foam instead of styrofoam, but I haven't seen anything that turns into a hard-shelled product. If there was perhaps something that under a specific combination of UV radiation would break down into its base components, that might work fairly well too. If we had something that was kind of like a plastic and then you could shine 2 different infrared wavelengths on it and it would chemically break down the whole thing and just dissolve it into a puddle of chemicals that could be then liquefied and filtered and reused, that would be amazing. But at a certain point, a technology like that isn't too far around the idea of just having nanobots create everything. Meanwhile, in the real world of what we can actually do, the better idea around this would have been for there to have been a program to mail in your broken controllers, and then your broken controllers would be disassembled and the shells and parts that could be reused would go towards the credit of the purchase of a new controller. Like, I probably have 3 or 4 Xbox core controllers like this, not this color, but something like that. I probably have 2 or 3 of them that have been worn out and have like stick drift, and I wouldn't really want to play with them. But if I could send them back and each one of them got me $20, $30 off of the price of an Elite controller Series 2, which is I think about $150, if I could get some major discount there, that would be great. Also, that would create a situation where you have people taking controllers to GameStop and getting a couple dollars selling used controllers to GameStop as far as GameStop credit, and then GameStop is either trashing them or selling them to someone else. But GameStop doesn't have the capability potentially to take apart the outer shells or reuse the circuitry for spare parts. Particularly in the part shortage, you would have thought there would have been more redemption programs like that, where people would ask for the old broken versions of things to repair and fix. But no, that's not happening either. Nobody wants to have a warehouse full of broken parts to fix other things. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says Remedy says that Quantum Break is leaving Game Pass, but will be coming back. The Xbox exclusive is being temporarily removed due to expiring licenses. Remedy seems like, in particular, the one company that gets these licensing availability negotiations wrong, because Quantum Break, Alan Wake, I think those are both Remedy. Both of them have come and gone multiple times on different platforms. That being said, Quantum Break is not even really the game that they want you to play anyway, so it probably doesn't concern Remedy that much. Quantum Break also was the video game that tied into a TV series, and so, or was trying to tie into a TV series, so it's kind of a different experience if you just played the game now versus if you were watching the TV series, but that also may have created some weird licensing issues. Moving on, Miyamoto was interviewed, and he says to watch out for Mario game news in a future Nintendo Direct. It's been 6 years since the last completely new Mario adventure. Mario Odyssey is a great game, can't really not say that. But it is worth pointing out that there was definitely some weirdness around Mario Odyssey, and unless we're just seeing Odyssey 2, if we see a new major Mario game, we should expect some kind of different weirdness. I doubt we would be in a new series of Mario games playing with the hats and taking control of characters as a gimmick, because in all fairness, that gimmick actually didn't even do too much. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see dinosaurs or seedlings that get really tall as returning characters. Since those were new characters introduced, we almost certainly will see Bullet Bills and Goombas. There were turtles in Odyssey, but I don't know if we ever even fought the turtles in Odyssey. I think we did. In a lot of ways, I guess there's a lot of room to bring back Koopa and have him have his collection of enemies play a bigger role in the new Mario game. But yeah, if anything, this isn't that big of news. It's kind of expected. It only really confirms that new game news for a new Mario game is coming through Nintendo Direct and nothing else. So don't expect it to be leaked at a Gamescom or an E3 if E3 ever happened again. I already touched upon this. Reviews of the Super Mario Bros. Movie are mixed as the film hits cinemas. Nintendo and Illumination's animated movie is released today. Yeah, mixed reviews. I don't see how anybody legitimately should go into this movie expecting anything more than just a kids movie. An average or slightly better than average kids movie is what you should expect. If you go in expecting that, you'll probably be happy. If you're expecting anything more, I don't know why you would have. Like, there's very little you can actually even do with Super Mario Brothers as a concept to make a great movie. Because it just has to be connected to the Mario games. Best case scenario would have been, I guess, that the Mario movie was as good as the feeling of the experience of Mario Odyssey, in which you're going around to a lot of different locations and then having a giant battle on the moon to save Princess Peach, which arguably Mario Odyssey probably would have been better as a movie, and this movie may have been better as a video game. But whatever. Yeah. Almost every kids movie gets pretty poorly reviewed. Because reviewers are not used to watching kids movies. There's no exclusive I only watch kids movie reviewers that I know of, even on like YouTube, where there are exclusive anime movie reviewers or anime TV show reviewers or horror movie reviewers on YouTube. Moving on, Multiversus has been pulled from digital stores as it's readying for a 2024 relaunch. The game will go fully offline in June and return next year. They had already announced this, but I do have a tinfoil hat conspiracy thought that maybe Justin Roiland, even though he has been, the cases against him and accusations against him legally have been dismissed, maybe his voice acting as far as doing Rick and Morty in this game is going to get replaced sneakily. And I bet we don't see a full case where Rick and Morty disappear as characters, but I wouldn't be surprised if this is the first salvo in a long list of Rick and Morty getting replaced by a new voice actor. This would be kind of the best place to test out a sound-alike voice actor to see if you could replace the voices and potentially have nobody notice. And if you find that voice actor did a good job in this game, I wouldn't be surprised if he becomes the new voice actor in the Rick and Morty animated show. Because they have not said anything, Cartoon Network, Adult Swim has not said anything about Justin Roiland getting his job back. And that is definitely the next step, is now Justin Roiland is probably going to have to sue a lot of people that fired him to probably not get his job back and instead get a massive paycheck instead as a settlement, because it's very unlikely that a judge would say you have to give him his job back as much as they would say you have to give him $5 billion because of his lost earnings potential there. And certainly, even if they did hire him back, what happens if they fire him the next month? Or it just becomes this real problem? Or what happens if they hire him back but they treat him awfully and he's just has to quit? So, yeah. I feel like if you were somehow guaranteed employment through some kind of like union type thought, or even through a government type thing, it probably would cover the butts of a lot of these companies very nicely. Where they said we cannot fire this person based on accusations due to this government law, otherwise therefore we have no comment and therefore we'll take no action. Which really there should be a lot more of that and a lot less of the at will, we can fire you for any reason or for no reason if we care about, as long as it doesn't violate very specific age, sex discrimination laws. I could very easily see them coin a phrase like social discrimination or reputation discrimination happening, and that becoming illegal also. As far as like saying if somebody is canceled on Twitter, they can't then be discriminated against by their employers. Of course, that really has very little to do with Multiversus and has more to do with the Justin Roiland story, and we'll just have to see what happens now. if I recall correctly, the Justin Roiland, and I hope that's the guy's name, said that he got a 7-figure settlement because of the accusations from the accusers already. So he definitely feels very vindicated, at least on those accusations. Maybe not on everything that was dug up on him. Moving on, Creatures Inc. CEO has stepped down amidst a high-level shakeup at the Pokemon studio. Ishihara will seemingly continue in his role as head of the Pokemon company. Okay. There's a lot of Pokemon stuff here in the background. Although, if this was supposed to be anywhere close to a full collection of Pokemon toys that were released in the last couple of years, the shelves would be a lot bigger. Pokemon in particular, massive amount of toys made around them, and particularly in its original heyday, a ton of toys were made around them. It's kind of hard to know or take too much from that announcement, though, as far as the way that goes. A shakeup probably is a good idea, in that anything that stops Pokemon games from potentially being as bad as Scarlet and Violet was, as far as just quality and lack of innovation and lack of 3D modeling of all the Pokemon, that's probably a good idea to just really step up the quality. There is also Pokemon Stadium is going either coming to the eShop for the Switch or is now available in the eShop, as far as just an old ROM being emulated. That being said, Pokemon Stadium I think is considerably nerfed when playing it on the Switch, because I don't think you can play multiplayer, even split screen multiplayer. There is no online capability built into it, and Pokemon Stadium originally would have had an adapter in which you could have imported and exported your Pokemon from your Game Boy cartridges into Pokemon Stadium, and there's no way to transfer that data over. So 3 major selling points around Pokemon Stadium just will not work on the Switch eShop version, which makes a much better argument to instead play Pokemon Stadium in an emulator instead, which can accommodate those major functions. Also worth pointing out, Pokemon Stadium is only really going to be able to import and play Pokemon that are in the first 150 or so of Pokemon. So nothing as far as a new Pokemon character. So yeah, it's really an odd offering for them to offer. Moving on, the Pokemon Center pop-up store is returning to London this month. Those looking to attend can reserve an entry slot now. This is from Video Games Chronicle, which is more of a UK-based website, so that's why they are focusing on Pokemon Center in London. No Man's Sky Interceptor update adds corrupted worlds and Sentinel jetpacks. Which, okay. That's more content for No More Sky, and it's nice to see that they're still doing No Man's Sky updates. Although at this point it's been so long, I wouldn't blame them if they stopped making content for No Man's Sky and instead just started to think about what a No Man's Sky 2 would look like. Amazon's gaming division is laying off 100 employees. It feels like they had already laid off quite a few employees. That being said, Amazon's gaming division has yet to really succeed in anything. The cuts will affect the game's growth group, San Diego Development Studio, and Prime Gaming. Prime Gaming in particular has really just been a go nowhere concept. They haven't added anything to it or grown it in any way. Miyamoto also said that designing Mario games for mobile was challenging. Mobile apps will not be the primary path of the future Mario games, is the full quote here. Yeah, in all fairness, Super Mario Run, not a good mobile game by any means, and not maybe made only a little bit better because it had Mario in it, but that's it. Although inherently they have the template of what a mobile game should have been for a Mario game, and it was Super Mario Maker 1 and 2, where you make a bunch of Mario levels and you share them online, and then you run through those Mario levels instead of trying to make a lower effort infinite runner. Like, if anything, this highlights the way Nintendo thinks, is that they looked at a infinite runner game that would have been popular 10 years before they started development on Super Mario Run, and they saw that as being the thing that mobile games should be and made that. Whereas a Genshin Impact, potentially, with Mario or Nintendo characters, would have made a lot more sense. Yeah, making like a long, ever-going, grindy RPG experience with Mario characters would have made a lot of sense, and then occasionally adding new characters from the Nintendo collection of characters. Going a little gacha, but not too gacha, where you're spending a ton of money. Otherwise, you're making things like Marvel Snap, where, Marvel Snap, if it was instead Nintendo Snap and the cards were all based on Nintendo people, that would work just as well. Which is to say, it wouldn't work that well, but well enough, because Marvel Snap isn't really a great game either, but I'm still playing it, so whatever. My favorite lewd waifu game, Destiny Child, if you switched all the lewd waifus with Nintendo Live 2D models, it would probably sell fairly well, just because of the fact that they're adding more content constantly to a gacha game like Destiny Child. But it wouldn't sell as well as Destiny Child or Nikke, which has sold even better because it has more microtransactions than I imagine. Inherently, we don't have great examples outside of things like Genshin Impact of successful mobile games. So, if anything, I would say we need to see at least 4 or 5 successful, very successful mobile games that make actual money on cell phones before Nintendo should have even begun to think about making mobile games. And Nintendo, I believe, acquired DNA, which was a mobile game app creator. And if they're not making Mario games, then we can assume that Nintendo's not making any mobile games at all, for the most part. And DNA is probably focusing on something else. I also feel like they probably figured out fairly quickly that a mobile game probably makes Nintendo a lot more money if you make a mobile game and sell it on the Switch Nintendo eShop than trying to sell that same game through the Play Store or the Google App Store. So, I wouldn't be surprised if we see more and more games that feel like and look like mobile games being sold directly through the Switch instead. Let's see. Moving on, our last Video Games Chronicle article for today says the ex-Stadia boss Phil Harrison has reportedly left Google. Google shuttered its Stadia gaming platform earlier this year. If this is true, I don't know if that really means too much to me. I don't know if Phil Harrison possibly could have done something else at Google and made a big impact. I don't know if he leaves Google and then goes and tries to make another company very similar to Stadia, if that would really matter at all either. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised that the person in charge of a project that publicly got shut down very quickly and abandoned, and obviously wasn't that big of a success, I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't want to stay at the company and instead either take a golden parachute or just go find a different job somewhere. Moving on to the Gemetsu articles. Cannon Dancer Osman launches April 13th worldwide, according to Gemetsu. It's a pixely side-scrolling shooter. This arcade title returns after nearly 30 years. I would have assumed that this actually was a brand new game just trying to look pixely and old, but apparently it is based on an old arcade game. Devolver Digital apparently has acquired Doinksoft, known for Gato Robo, Demon Throttle, and Gunbrella. I only recognize Gato Roboto, or Gato Robot. I don't even recognize these other two games. Was this announced? Gunbrella is not out yet. This does look interesting, so I'll put it on the follow list. Yeah, my only real concern here would have been if this was announced on April 1st, but it was instead announced April 3rd. And if anything, this might be evidence that Devolver Digital is not going to do a big presentation for E3, since E3 is not happening. Therefore, there are real announcements around actual things they're doing may just be announced in this fashion via press releases and through websites like Gematsu. Let's see. PlayStation Store for PS5 has added accessibility tags, detailed information on accessibility features supported in the games, clear text, large text, high contrast visuals, audio cue alternatives, directional audio indicators. These are things that system-wide make a lot more sense, instead of every game having their own separate system as far as how do you turn on accessibility features, or do you have accessibility features. So a lot of the accessibility features I've seen in games seem kind of silly and poorly designed, but it isn't a terrible idea that if going forward with a PlayStation 6, all games were required to have closed captions for the audio impaired that have audio descriptions in it also as a second option, and a clear text option that would make the text be like white on a black background or black on a white background at all times so you could easily see it, or that the text would be bigger. And yeah, a few other things do definitely make some sense. At some point though, you can't accommodate everyone, but you should try to accommodate more people, and it should be something that you just set up by default in your profile for all games instead of having to potentially adjust things, which that's not what this is. This is just giving you information as to what is available. So it's basically telling you Ghost of Tsushima's Director's Cut has these options, but the next game on the PlayStation Store may not have these visual options, instead of it being required. It's kind of crazy that there isn't even a default system as far as displaying text amongst all games. Because you really would think that there would be one either API like DirectX or one header library that everything uses. But then Windows definitely tried to do that with its Windows supplied DLLs and DirectX, and there still are multiple versions of DLLs and DirectXs that people use. Let's see. we already talked about the Nintendo Switch Online adding Pokemon Stadium. Here you can see the level of graphics with the 3D characters, and that it's alright, but not great as far as the number of polygons. Says additional accessories may be required for multiplayer modes sold separately. I don't feel like that's accurate, though. I don't feel like you can do multiplayer for Pokemon Stadium. I feel like they took the description of Pokemon Stadium from many years ago. Yeah. Nintendo literally handed them the description of Pokemon Stadium for the Nintendo 64 and didn't even change a single word. Or Gamatsu has found the description via Nintendo and is not pointing out that no, you won't be able to buy additional accessories to play multiplayer. Pokemon Stadium, I don't think has much of a story, if it has any story at all in it. So it really is just fighting Pokemon over and over again, I think, for the most part. Let's see. A game called Magician's Dead Force of the Soul has been delayed to fall of 2023 in Japan. It's apparently a action game. A game called The Inquisitor has a story teaser trailer. If you want to check that out. Maybe it's a bit Easter themed. Easter is coming up, but there aren't too many Easter events or Easter video games to play out there. If you were going to play a video game to celebrate Easter, which is very much, I guess, against the idea of giving up something and being mournful for Lent and working up to Easter, as far as the themes of sacrifice, if you don't celebrate Lent. There's, like in Assassin's Creed 2 or Requiem or Revolution, one of the Ezio, I think, trilogy, there's a point where you protect somebody doing a passion play of Jesus being executed, but it's literally just one mission. Let's see, we already talked about Xbox Game Pass adding Loop Hero, Iron Brigade, Ghostwire Tokyo, and more in early April. I believe it's the Epic Game Store that is having an Easter sale, but Steam isn't, and I'm not seeing any other storefront doing that. It's almost a shot across the bow, frankly, to have an Easter sale, because then you're basically endorsing Christianity while ignoring things like Passover, which would be probably the biggest holiday in the Jewish religion, or Ramadan in the Muslim religion, or any of the other religions that are more Eastern that I couldn't even name, as far as like what Hinduism, Buddhism, Shintoism, as far as what their biggest holidays are. So yeah, specifically so religiously focused events, probably better off not having a sale. Although Christmas is also a pretty big religious holiday, it has been so watered down that it kind of gets a pass that people have Christmas sales, and very often people say season's greetings to cover multiple seasons in the winter solstice festivals, or they just say happy holidays and don't actually say Christmas. Although most people do just say Christmas if they have a Christmas sale. But most sales also are more around Black Friday and fall sales anyways. Moving on, the 3D platformer Paperman Adventure Delivered has been announced for the PS4, PS5, Xbox Series, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. This looks to me like it's potentially a racing parkouring type challenge game. Might be player versus player. Some 3D platforming. If I had more time, I'd watch this trailer, but I don't. A game called Remnant 2, The World of Yasha trailer is available if you want to check that out. Which I think Remnant 2 is a dark monster shooter game. Although this trailer is really just showing the monsters and not the shooting part. Yep, they are some uniquely creepy characters. Yeah, third-person shooter. Overwatch 2 has revealed a new hero called Lifeweaver, an intelligent and curious adventurer who plans to use his biolight technology to make a world a better place. I saw somewhere that he was part plant and that he was, I think, gender fluid, which, yeah, Overwatch is pretty big on the idea of tokenism, in that they'll make a character gay or in some other way be a token towards a minority class, which on some level you would call that representation. On another level, though, you would say they don't characterize any of the characters in a game like Overwatch 2 enough for them to be anything other than token characters always. Like, this is the token giant dwarf guy that I couldn't tell you anything about his character or his backstory. Gameplay trailer. So he's got like these plant attacks. He looks like he might be a support character. I imagine at some point using the word foppish is going to become an insult, but that is definitely how I describe his appearance, kind of a boys love kind of character, with his shirt open and fancy hair. Which that's fine, really. There is possibly an argument to be made if you went through the entire list of every character in Overwatch 2, if there aren't perhaps a lot of more masculine presenting females and feminine presenting males in the game, more than you would expect on average. So there might be a complaint to be made there as far as just a lack of variety, or them pushing a narrative too hard. Meanwhile, you definitely run into this situation where people who just want to play Overwatch 2 probably don't care what the characters really look like or any tokenism around that. You do have this armor that was introduced with all the Overwatch 1 characters, where you have like armor over this lady's chest that makes her feel bigger, bulkier, more masculine. And then you have this giant barbarian lady that does show her stomach, but then she's like super tall compared to this character or any of the other characters, and Amazonian-esque. There is a decent amount of skin being shown here and a little bit of skin being shown here, but overall I've seen most of the characters get covered in kind of a ridiculous amount of armor. that was not so much there in the first game. I haven't heard of people really playing Overwatch lately, so I suspect it has a decent following of people still, but that following is not growing, and it's probably slightly declining every few weeks, every month or so, as people get bored with Overwatch 2 and leave. Moving on, Space Engineers for the PS4 and PS5 launches in beta on May 11th. I think might be one of those games where you fly around in space and disassemble things. They say it's a simulation game. A tactical turn-based survival brawler, Space Prison, has been announced for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. Which, you have a alien lady with a collar over her neck. The actual screenshot gives a much flatter 2D images of the characters, and it reveals the game to actually just be a turn-based RPG experience. Guess there isn't a ton of examples in which you're in a prison or a space prison. Is that supposed to be this girl? Yeah. Drawn very differently. But I don't know what you could really get around that either. Like, there's a point in one of the Fable games where you're in prison for an entire act, and it's incredibly boring and dull. Being a prisoner and busting out of a prison is a fun concept in video games. Being a prisoner and not busting out of prison is not fun. Even if you are surrounded by aliens. Like that Guardians of the Galaxy, I think it was Guardians of the Galaxy 2, where they were all in prison, was a fun little sequence because it was only a few minutes, 20, 30 minutes at most of the movie. If it had been the entire movie and they hadn't escaped at the end, or if they escaped in the last 5 minutes, that wouldn't have been anywhere as interesting. Moving on, Fire Emblem Engage version 2.0.0 update, expansion pass wave 4 is now available. If you want to check that out, that's Switch exclusive. Blaze Union Story to Reach the Future remaster launches April 27th in Japan. Apparently it's been updated. What is the update? Watch the debut trailer and visit the eShop here. It is a turn-based RPG, and you can tell by the screenshot it's not going to be much of anything, even though this animation here definitely makes it seem like it would be a lot more. And even the trailer here is trying to make it seem like it would be a lot more, but mostly you're looking at these tiny little pixely characters. And I wouldn't be surprised if all these animations are either only a few seconds long, adding up to a total of maybe a few minutes of video footage, or aren't in the game at all. There increasingly still seems to be, well, maybe not increasingly, but there still seems to be far too many games that hire an anime company to make this fancy animations for the trailers and then sell you a game that looks completely different. And in particular, when you're talking the Nintendo Switch, getting refunds is not as easy as it probably should be. Whereas I feel like Nintendo probably should crack down on just incredibly deceptive advertising CGs. Famitsu review scores for issue 1792 are out. They gave Curse of the Sea Rats a 28 out of 40, a game I don't even recognize, and that's a pretty low score. And they gave Like a Dreamer a 32 out of 40, which is a decent score. If anything, it feels like Famitsu has gotten a little bit more generous with its review scores, though, where you'd think that 7s across the board would still be considered a decent game. Feels like, to me, if you're not getting at least a 32, you really don't have a decent game. And then Famitsu also has the ability to only review a couple of games a week, so they're picking the best looking potential games, the games that seem to have the most potential to review, I would assume. We already talked about the No Man's Sky Interceptor update, so we don't need to cover it, although Gematsu does have a much longer and detailed list of what is being added. Quite a bit of extra detail there. Hammerwatch 2 has been announced for the PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC, which is apparently some kind of RPG game. Which, yeah, it looks alright for an RPG game. Probably too zoomed out for my taste, but it does seem like there's quite a bit of detail. Like this is all being rendered in this art style at a higher 2K resolution than 1080p, but then still zoomed out so far that it's not going to really matter. Disney's Dreamlight Valley Pride of the Valley update is now available. They've talked about this update quite a lot for as long as it's taken to come out. And this will be the update almost certainly that determines whether or not Dreamlight Valley as a Stardew Valley clone potentially has enough audience to stay alive, or if Disney doesn't just quietly cancel it in the next 6 months to a year. One Piece Odyssey Story DLC Reunion of Memories has been announced, which I don't think One Piece Odyssey is even out yet. So they're, I think, already announcing DLC. One Piece Odyssey is available. Interesting. Didn't realize it was out. So this creates a situation where I can, one, put this on the wish list because it's rated very positively with more than 30 reviews, so it's relevant. And two, I can try and I can make a YouTube short around One Piece Odyssey for the DLC that has been announced, which may be a case in which I accidentally double up and make 2 YouTube shorts around One Piece Odyssey, but whatever. That's not a big deal. If I'm going to make any big deal about making too many YouTube shorts, I would have to just start curating a lot better and making a lot less YouTube shorts in general. And YouTube shorts are going to be a mess on my channel for the next couple of months anyways. And there's going to be days where the 2 get released at the same time, or some just don't get released at all in a specific time slot, because I was reprogramming my macro that schedules them to cycle between different time slots. That way, instead of having a whole bunch scheduled up 2 or 3 months in advance at like 6 in the morning, and then having to schedule a whole nother group a couple months in advance at 8 in the morning. Now it does 1 video at 6, 1 video at 8, 1 video at 10, and so on for each day. It's still going to be fairly random, though, no matter what happens. But while I was programming my macro to do that, it messed up, or I programmed the program wrong in the first attempt, and so now I have a bunch of videos scheduled in weird times that I'll have to try and adjust and fix. I probably won't adjust anything. I'll probably just let them come out when they come out. Moving on, a game called Gun Jam launches April 19th in PC. What I desperately want to have happen today is not have to run to the bathroom, because I've fairly consistently had to do that almost every stream in the past couple of weeks. Gun Jam is a run and gun shooter. Redfall has a character trailer of Layla Ellison. I feel like they really wanted to make this character more interesting and have not really done enough so far to make her interesting. Also interesting about this trailer is that it's rated M for mature and was flagged because it starts off with this vampire's skull at the beginning. So it was flagged with sensitive content. Making this character interesting, a biomedical engineer student with telekinetic abilities, which that's quite the combination, is probably a little too late, because in general they've tried to make Redfall interesting and done a terrible job as far as promoting and advertising it. They've also delayed the game. So if this was like the first trailer for Redfall and they were introducing the character then, they would have taken a good step forward. But now inherently with the delay, unless they are literally just trying to take a second bite at the apple as far as promoting and advertising the game, I don't think too many people are even going to give this trailer the time of day. Literally, I'm not giving it the time of day as far as actually watching this trailer, which is playing here. This game still very much feels like a high action Left 4 Dead type game, and they're actually saying it's actually closer to something like Far Cry. That's what I think they actually are trying to sell it as. But the idea of shooting vampires in a Far Cry game, I'm not sure that that concept works either. Moving on, a game called Lost Epic is coming to the Switch on April 19th. Which, okay, it looks like it's an action side-scrolling game. Let's see. You can get a general idea of what it looks like. Yeah, an action side-scrolling game with fishing and a lot of hack and slash games. The last game I played like this did not actually work particularly well. It just wasn't an interesting enough experience or a polished enough experience. Lost Epic apparently is already on Steam. It's mostly positive. Guess I have to put this on the wish list because it, again, is mostly positive. Although if I was going to get really picky and say things that are 72% positive, maybe a little too low. And I'm double checking, trying to make sure that this is not the same developer of the other game I played. No, it isn't. Because I definitely wouldn't want to play that Vagabond, I think was the name of the game. Vagrant. No, was the name of it. Vagrant Story. That did not come out particularly well. Cook Serve Forever launches in early access on May 8th for the PC, which I assume this is a continuation on Cook Serve Delicious. Yeah, although in a lot of ways it seems like a weird visual challenge rhythm game. It doesn't look anything like Cook Serve Delicious, so it might just be trying to create some name confusion. The idea of a rhythm game to cook food might be an interesting idea, but frankly, I think I would just be distracted by the rhythm game aspect or distracted by the food, one or the other or both, and would rather just look at food. I kind of feel like that is the best way to implement good looking food in a video game, is to just implement good looking food in a video game as an item and show it to the player. Don't have a cooking minigame like Breath of the Wild or so many other games. Moving on, God of War Ragnarok has a New Game Plus update now available with new armor, level cap enhancements, enchantments, and more. Which I guess that's a great thing for people who've recently bought God of War Ragnarok on PC and probably very late to the party for anybody who bought God of War Ragnarok on the PS4 or PS5 when it came out, because they've had to wait quite a while. Although I'm not 100% sure that the God of War series really has enough of a sticking power that you would want to actively play the story twice, because the story may be so linear and so well written that you would just want to experience it once and then have that be your experience. The same is kind of true with The Last of Us Part 1. When that remaster remake came out, I'm not sure how many people really wanted to play the game a second time if they had already memorized the experience they had the first time. And then a game called Homestead Arcania launches April 21st. This is a witch lady farming game, I believe. Farming sim with magic and RPG. Maybe some RPG grinding stuff. Giving magic to a character so they can farm makes a lot of sense, because then that lets you potentially speed up the process a lot more. I'm not sure you're really fighting things though, more than you are just farming on top of farming on top of farming, and maybe looking for resources in a lot of places. I guess it's an interesting comparison whether you would rather a witch in a farming game like Homestead Arcania or a witch in a Dark Souls game like Little Witch Nobedia, which I'm not sure Little Witch Nobedia was really that well received or advertised particularly well when it actually launched. Okay, so we're going to start going through games that have come out on Steam. In kind of a surprise release, we have Passepartout 2. This is a game where you actually paint paintings, and then theoretically there's some kind of comparison or algorithm that gives you scores for this. The first Passepartout game, I think for the most part, here takes place in just this alleyway where you're painting, and that's it. And you can see it's very positive, but it wasn't on my wish list because I kind of just dismissed it. I kind of thought it was VR, but it doesn't actually have any VR support. But seemingly here they've really expanded this out to being much more of a game. I wouldn't be surprised if the little villa you see walking around isn't that big, but now it does seem like you will paint paintings and then have to go find people to buy your paintings or get inspiration or hints as to what you should be painting. Ideally, you would like to see a VR type game where you can just paint in VR. That being said, it's not that expensive or messy to paint in real life instead, compared to buying a VR headset. Let's see, Vico 3 Tale of the Seven Seas doesn't look like anything. Four Seasons Runner doesn't look like anything. Today is Wednesday, so we should see some adult games. I'm going to give this one a chance, but it more than likely is just an alt text game. We can experiment on making a YouTube short around an alt text game. The truth of the matter though is I can't really experiment that much because I don't really get enough feedback or pay attention to the feedback as far as which YouTube shorts get views and which don't. It's just wildly all over the place. Our first adult game here is called Waifu Puzzles, which is just jigsaw puzzles with anime 2D girls in sexual situations. And it really does just seem like it's potentially a collection of anime girls that they licensed or downloaded off the internet. It's 59 cents English only, nothing special there. Escape the Unknown, Awaken the Realm. Doesn't look like it's polished enough to interest me. Race Code. Doesn't look like it's anything. Cursed Pantsu. Now, pantsu being the Japanese word for mostly girls and ladies' underwear that they wear under their skirts. So these are 3D CG anime girls kicking and fighting, and apparently you can switch different types of underwear they're wearing. So story-driven action-adventure game, RPG, with platforming elements. That's a lot of descriptions. That being said, looking at the screenshots, it seems like there is at least a small attempt to make a game here. I'm not 100% sure they actually succeeded in making a game. It's $4.89. It's English, Chinese, and Japanese. No voice acting in any of them. So it includes nudity, underwear fetishism. The player is attacking female characters and tearing off their clothes. Suggestive themes and strong language. All characters are over 18. In a lot of ways, it feels like it's an attempt at making a clone to Akiba Strip, with the difference being that it seems like you might be playing as a female character who attacks either male zombies or female humanoid looking characters. It doesn't look terrible, so I'm going to put it on the fall list just because I'd like to see what kind of reviews it gets. Although, in all honesty, reviews have not been so far particularly helpful on adult games in particular, because the Sex with Hitler games in particular, which are just joke troll games as far as being adult content games, get highly well reviewed, positively reviewed, just because there's enough people who think those games are funny and those troll games are funny. And at a certain point, for its audience, I think it is accomplishing its goal and satisfying the audience. Adventurous Gallantry looks like a visual novel that you could probably dismiss, but I'll give it a chance, see if it gets some reviews. Tin Edge doesn't look like anything. This Fighter's Game doesn't look like anything. Hard to Make a Romantic Cartoon visual novel, Boys Love, Guy on Guy. Give that a chance. It's English and Korean with Korean full audio, which might explain the stronger jawline on this male character, it being a Korean game versus a Japanese animator, Japanese game, where the males tend to stick to more feminine appearance in Japanese boys love games. First Racer doesn't look like anything. Forest Fields and Fortresses, we can say no to. Here we have a cell phone game, basically a clone of a more popular cell phone game being ported to Steam. Zombie Jokers doesn't look like anything. anything, this may be just a short stream somewhat, in that there aren't that many games that came out, and most of them are garbage, even more than average. Super Death Shell VR. Alright, I'll give that a chance. And there's just not that much news happening. I wonder if it's a case because of April Fool's Day that we're just having delayed announcements, and basically the entire week is being taken off by a lot of news people and news press releases coming out. Movie House Film Studio Tycoon is already mixed, so I'm going to say no to that. Otherwise, I might have given it a chance. See, the only thing I guess to really ask is what's the problem with it. It's a typical mobile tycoon game. The probably bot reviews led me to with false expectations. Otherwise, I could have enjoyed it more for what it is. I see all these positive reviews for the game here on Steam, and all I can think is that either they just don't understand the point of the reviews, or they got the game for free. Which, getting the game for free within the Steam system would mean your review wouldn't be counted. There was a game called The Movies, and I think there's a lot of people who felt like this was going to be that game, or a remake of that game, The Movies, and it isn't. And obviously The Movies is more popular, so we'll leave it at that. We have a Fight for Your Resurrection, which has basically asset flip 3D models, and half of the screenshots are blurry. I don't know why you'd even try to make an asset flip fighting game, or try to make a fighting game in the first place. It would make a lot more sense to make an RPG Maker game first, and then try to put a fighting game mechanic inside the programming of an RPG game. Maybe not actually using RPG Maker. Then to start with a fighting game and try to go down that route when you haven't succeeded in making a fighting game first, or you don't have the experience to make a fighting game. Here we have what looks like a Japanese only visual novel. Nope, it's a Korean only visual novel. Not a lot to really say about it. You see 3 anime girls and that's it. Extreme Off-Road Simulator is nothing. Bakken ski jumping. I don't think there's quite enough here to say yes to this, particularly since they're putting it in early access. Necro City has a level of polish to it that should give it a chance. Layla is a walking simulator. It looks like just a random collection of models and visuals. It comes in waves. Doesn't look polished enough. Moneymaker is just an idle clicker game of no quality. Sheepdog. I don't know if I would want to play as a sheepdog in a 2D environment, although there might be an argument if you made a 3D sheepdog that where you're running around trying to round up the sheep. That would make some more sense. Inherently, you have blue and red on the backs of a lot of these sheeps, and then there's one ram here. The color on their backs is what they do is they put a color pouch for each male ram, and when it mates with a sheep, it stains their back of their fur that color. So this tells the breeder, the rancher, that the blue ram, which I assume this is ram, that I assume those are horns, mated with this one, this one, this one, this one, and then the red one mated with this one, this one, this one, and this one. Doesn't mean they impregnated him, and I'm not sure that there's anything that really stops the blue one from also going to the red ones and mixing and matching. But I don't think there's really a reason after that you would put all the blue ones over here and all the red ones over there after the fact. Like, inbreeding in general is not that big of a deal as far as sheep, so yeah. I don't think there's quite enough of a game there otherwise. Let's see, furries in magazines. Well, this doesn't say it's an adult game, but I kind of assume that furries in magazines would be. Is it furries or furies? It might be furies in magazines. So this is what they're calling it, a graphic novel style top-down shooting action game. And then some of these screenshots here kind of have this like pre-rendered flatter CGI comic book vision to it, which that never really worked. Like, nobody ever embraced the idea of comics with this type of animation because it just doesn't seem like something anybody would want to see. Inherently, there is potentially an argument that there should be slightly better art in a lot of Marvel and DC comics, but there's also a lot of history behind them that you can't change it that much to the point where you can make something like this. And then manga has that same history and anime has that same history, so this just never felt like it could have caught on, and it never did catch on. And in video game format, it really sticks out like a sore thumb. So absolutely no to that one. A base building automation game. It looks like there might be a little bit more to it too. Magical mixture mill. Mind hack. Yeah, there might be something to this also. I'm being fairly generous. Terrascope as a city builder puzzler. Give that a chance. Organs Please launch trailer, which I assume this might be something like a Papers, Please, but also seems a little bit like Fallout Shelter. It's rated very positively. Dark and satirical management sim when you take control of a recycling factory with a twist that recycles humans. Your job is to decide who escapes our dying planet in a cozy spaceship and who sacrifices their blood, sweat, and tears for humanity, literally. Alright. $12.59 is a little expensive there, but whatever. Farm in Another World doesn't look like much of anything. Then we have another adult game, Wojak Wants Hentai. I don't know who Wojak is. This is some kind of troll game that has just a bunch of asset flipped shooter characters running around shooting people in bunny outfits and squirrel outfits. And then there's a Donald Trump. And then the actual adult content is completely disconnected content of a more realistic 3D CGI lady or a couple 3D CGI characters that look way better than the actual game part of the content. This is one of those great examples of a bad game getting merged with bad adult content and trying to sell itself for $1.79 on Steam. while also throwing in some, I assume it's supposed to be Trump parody meme nonsense. This is the quality of game that really shouldn't be allowed on Steam, in favor of trying to promote better quality games, whether they are adult games or not. Grimgrad, I kind of like the visuals here for this screenshot and this screenshot. Otherwise, it seems like it's just a city builder strategy game, which honestly I wouldn't want to play a city builder strategy game, but I'll give it a YouTube short at the very least. Agony VR is now available, which it's selling for $12.59 English full audio. Agony was, the character was in hell and there was a lot of nudity in hell, topless monster creatures. I don't feel like Agony sold that well, and that's really where this would help, is if I could see Agony non-VR version. One of the problems with Agony was that it was not really much of a game. Then had some pretty bad puzzles. So you both have Agony Unrated here, which came out the 30th at 65% positive mixed reviews, on sale right now for $2.24. Or you have the original Agony at 48% positive at $2.24. And Succubus, following that, has been a lot better in reviews at 80% positive. Although you also have to see that the number of reviews you get for any game is not super high, particularly when you're talking Mad Mind Studio games that are trying to push the bar as far as, here's a game that has adult content in it but isn't incredibly low quality. That being said, in the case of Agony, it really wasn't that big of a difference. There was a whole bunch of controversy as far as the adult patch was canceled, no plans to release the game uncensored, link below for the official statement, and so they canceled the adult patch, and then they came out with unrated instead. Apparently they're making a Agony Lords of Hell DLC. So you definitely would want to get the unrated version of this if you were going to get any version of Agony, but there's not really a good reason to get any version of it at all. Yeah, because the game is just incredibly bad. They really dropped the ball on the quality of the game, first and foremost. And they did better with Succubus, so it would make a lot more sense to buy Succubus if you were going to play an adult game. Although inherently you run into the problem that if you do buy Succubus, which does kind of fix the issue in that you're playing as a female Succubus in this, where you're just playing as a naked guy in Agony. If I was to cover this and try to cover it on YouTube, it would have to be censored almost certainly to the point of being unrecognizable. So, me personally owning Succubus is fine if somebody wanted to gift me the game, but I'd have to think of a whole different way of reviewing it. And Yeah, not a lot of YouTubers have figured out ways to review adult content without also getting community guideline strikes. The Sorcerer's Summit looks like it's a fine game, but it doesn't feel very complicated, and that you're just running backwards and forwards and shooting upward. In a lot of ways, it's a slight take on Asteroids, where the insects that you're shooting would come down from the top of the screen, instead having them come side to side. But yeah, it's basically a shoot 'em up game. They're calling it a score attack game. We have a game called Wall World. Which I don't quite understand whether you have a top-down perspective here, or whether you're... I guess it is just this is upward and that is downward. Yeah. Overall, though, this really doesn't look like much of a game. Just a mining game. There's a game I played somewhat similar to this, where you go on the planets and you mine down for specific resources and specific goals, and it just became very complicated and boring fairly fast. I'm gonna say no to Wall World. You know what? I'll give it a YouTube short though. And see, we only have like 3 more games that have been released today. A game called The Aching, which looks like an old game, but I don't recognize it. It's inspired by old graphic adventures games from Sierra and LucasArts released in the 80s, so it is a new game inspired by Sierra type games. I'm gonna give this a follow, but I almost certainly would not play it, and it would be crazy if I did play it. So I've covered similar games, but they had more relevancy. Winnie the Pooh's book writing speedrunner. Write the complete 10 chapters of the original 1926 Winnie the Pooh, which is public domain, as fast as you can to complete for the first place in the leaderboards. Well, this might be the beginning of a disturbing trend in which we start to see people taking public domain books and turning them into a typing speedrunning challenge, which even for educational purposes or teaching typing, this is not really going to do much for you. And then they're just asset flipping background images. None of these images are going to have Winnie the Pooh in them. And then last we have Brewmastery Tavern Simulator, which I feel like there was already a Tavern Simulator that was released a few months ago, but I'll give this one a chance too. Let's see. For GameDeveloper.com articles, we have an obituary for the Catan creator Klaus Teuber, passing away at age 70. In addition to Catan, its various expansions, Teuber also designed the tabletop games such as Interdecker, Barbarossa, and Timberland. Okay, I'm not sure that's 100% video game news, but it's adjacent enough. There is a Settlers of Catan, at least one Settlers of Catan video game out there. Paradox is closing Yumiya and Malmo Studios to veer away from decentralized development, which is kind of funny because most game companies have been veering towards decentralized development for the last 10 years or so, and I guess with the mergers of Microsoft acquiring people, we might start to see companies that have a lot of different game companies starting to decentralize it. particularly in the case of Microsoft, it does make a lot of sense to move away from a decentralized development. Although decentralized is a weird statement, weird phrase to use. But yeah, if anything, though, I would say Microsoft still probably will be fairly decentralized and have different studios in which people work on different games. They'll just get rid of the middlemen as far as the management and centralize all of that. Moving on, Capcom's share price hit all-time high after Resident Evil 4's remake. We had already talked about that. I question heavily how much management really is needed in a lot of game companies. Some of it is definitely needed. You can't just let the artists and the programmers work forever and never be on budget. But once you start to get to Konami or Ubisoft levels of management, from what it seems like looking at from the outside inward, it feels like there's managers of specific game companies and their teams, and above that there's managers of divisions, and above that there's managers of other divisions that are even bigger, and then you could be 6, 7, 8 steps away from being from the CEO, and the CEO of Ubisoft potentially saying something or making a decision that affects everybody in the company, while him really being completely disconnected from what seems to be going on otherwise in the company. Moving on, GameDeveloper.com has this article, Rescoping the Narrative of Goodbye Volcano High to Find Meaning in the Apocalypse. The narrative director, Geneval, explains how they tweaked Goodbye Volcano's High unwieldy narrative to help the title's core cast of characters shine. So this is one of those stories that would be fairly helpful if you're trying to make a video game and talk about writing, assuming what is being said is actually helpful and accurate as far as an interview with Geneval, or an article by Geneval, self-pinned article potentially. We also talked about this before. Mario no longer has a future in mobile games, says Shigeru Miyamoto. Mario probably should have never been in the mobile games anyways. It would have made a lot more sense if it was a Captain Toad, or a Yoshi, or Luigi. Waluigi. Yeah, or Wario. Having their own side games on mobile would make a lot of sense. A Wario game full of microtransactions would be kind of ironic, but would make some sense. Wario mini games on mobile. Quantum Break temporarily leaving Xbox Game Pass due to rights issue. Wouldn't be surprised if it's a music rights issue in the game more than it's a rights issue as to who has the rights to own Quantum Break and publish it. One second while I drink some water. There's a report that says Sony's next PlayStation handheld will be a conduit for remote play. The rumored device won't be a traditional handheld and will instead leverage remote play to let users access their PlayStation 5 catalog. In a lot of ways, that's kind of what I would like to see with the Switch 2, is that whatever the next console Nintendo comes out with has just the capability to stream to the already existing Nintendo Switches for a remote play feature. Of course, Sony is coming from the other direction, in which they are assuming everybody's going to own a PlayStation 5 and then want to take those very fancy, highly demanding AAA games on the PlayStation 5 and then squash it down to a Nintendo Switch-like controller or Steam Deck-like controller. I'm not sure how many people really want to do that, particularly if you're starting to talk about remote play that only works well inside your own house and doesn't have any real functionality as far as being outside the house or in a car, where you can't connect to a site, a Wi-Fi connection. Yeah. Nintendo games are inherently designed to work offline at the moment, and so the Switch has that extra value of being able to be played in a car or being played at a place where Wi-Fi is not available, whereas a remote play only device would have to have a price that reflects the fact that it has to be on Wi-Fi, and it's going to be a limited experience visually for games that really are demanding a higher experience. Sony has always tried to sell itself as being high quality AAA, high res type games. They've never really tried to make mobile Nintendo medium res, low res games. So it's really going to come down to price, and Sony has never really shown any interest in having anything reasonably priced. So if they came out with a controller or a Switch competitor that was, let's say, $120 even, that is going to be kind of a tough sale on top of a $500 PlayStation 5 and a bunch of games. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if this rumored handheld device it never comes out, or it comes out and it's not their main focus anyways. Like, I think a new PS Vita type competitor isn't really going to help Sony as much as just a PlayStation 6 or having more exclusives and better games would. And then our last GameDeveloper.com article says Stadia boss Phil Harrison has left Google. Apparently they have confirmed it. Or they're just re-reporting on what Insider is saying. And then we've got some follow list cleanup games. We have one here that's coming out March 31st, so it's not even out yet. Or no, it is out, it just doesn't have any reviews, so I'll give it some more time. Then we have a mixed one called Do You See the Waving Cape, which is mixed reviewed, so we'll take this off. Then we have a game called Do Not Open. See, this is what's crazy, is you have like a horror game like this that is pretty good looking, but not enough people have reviewed it to make it relevant, and I don't even remember it existing at all. And I could very well be tricked simply by a nice trailer and some nice screenshots here. Or this might actually be somebody trying to do a good job with a good horror game. This actually does look like a good horror game. So if anything, I'll give this more time, and if I came back, say 6 months to a year from now and looked at this again, I probably would just say put it on the wish list even if it doesn't have enough reviews. DNF Duel, on the other hand, is consistently mixed as a fighting game, so we can get rid of that. D&D Adventure Rogue's Choice. I think we can say no to this. Can you name a game D&D and just make no reference to Dungeons & Dragons? Probably. You could probably argue D&D stands for something else. This game, I think we say no to because it just doesn't have any reviews. Plus it doesn't really look like anything. It's also apparently supposed to be VR or VR support. DKLS. I don't even know why this is on the follow list. Again, that looks like it's supposed to be a VR game, but it's not even saying it supports VR in this case. Sometimes I'm starting to wonder if some of these games are games that I actively didn't put on the fall list, but they have the app ID of a different game that was removed from Steam, and that they reuse app IDs after a while. Although I don't know why Steam would ever reuse an app ID instead of just generating a new one. Probably could say no to this. Yeah. For an RPG game to have only 37 reviews, it is a little too irrelevant. And frankly, I don't want to play a ton of RPG games. Distorted World, we can say no to. Distant Memories, as far as a visual novel, is rated very positively, so we'll just say yes to that. Inherently, I'm going to end up with a ton of visual novels on my wish list and play just about none of them. Disney Movies VR is an actual Disney game that we can see is a mixed review, which, yeah, I guess the idea here would be to, if you had VR, keep this, check this out. And I'm actually interested as to it. It's free, so I shouldn't complain. However, Disney can do so much better than this. The best experience are the UI and the Jungle Book Snake. The worst experience is everything else. Spherical video is not VR. Hardware does not define content. Just because I can eat cement with a spoon doesn't make it a food experience. This is as much VR as YouTube 360 video. While it does not have a bad thing, it's rather poorly done here. Okay. So this was some kind of like Disney experiment that they failed at. I don't know why Disney would even bother leaving this up as a product from 2016 at that point. But I guess it also would kind of suck to take it down. Alright, well, with that is going to be it for this stream. Thanks everybody who chatted and said hi. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.